Commander Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when everything changed. The bridge of the UES Defender was quiet in the early hours, with only the soft hum of the ship's engines breaking the silence. Most of his crew was still asleep, and Jake preferred these peaceful moments before the chaos of another day began. Then the emergency. Transmission came through. The holographic display crackled to life in front of him, and Jake nearly dropped his coffee mug. Standing before him was General Krath of the Vorthok Empire, one of the most feared military leaders in the galaxy. But something was wrong. The general's usually proud posture was slumped, and his scaled face showed an expression that Jake had never seen from any Vorthok before. Fear. Human Commander, General Krath began, his deep voice shaking slightly. I am contacting you under emergency protocols. We require immediate assistance. Jake set down his coffee and leaned forward. In his 15 years of military service, he had never received a direct communication from the Vorthok. These weren't allies or friends, they were barely even neutral. The Vorthok Empire controlled 3 star systems and had a reputation for solving problems with brute force. They didn't ask for help from anyone, especially not humans. What kind of assistance, General? Jake asked carefully. The alien general's jaw tensed, and Jake could see this was difficult for him to admit. Our war beasts have malfunctioned. They are no longer following orders. Jake raised an eyebrow. The Vorthok war beasts were legendary. Throughout the galaxy, these creatures were the size of earth elephants, but built like predators. With claws that could tear through starship armor and teeth designed for crushing bones, the Vorthok had used them in battles for centuries, and they were considered unstoppable weapons of war. When you say malfunctioned, Jake said slowly, what exactly do you mean? General Krath's scales seemed to darken with embarrassment. They refuse all commands from their handlers. They have gathered around a group of human prisoners taken during our recent border dispute and will not allow any Vorthok to approach. When my soldiers attempt to retrieve the prisoners or regain control of the beasts, they attack. The words hung in the air between them. Jake felt his stomach drop as he realized what the general was telling him. How many casualties? Jake asked quietly. 3 of my best beast handlers are dead. 7 more are in the medical bay with severe injuries. The admission clearly caused the proud warrior physical pain. The creatures show no aggression toward the human prisoners. They appear to be protecting them. Jake's mind raced. This didn't make sense. The Vorthok war beasts were bred and trained from birth to be weapons. They were conditioned to obey their handlers without question and to view all other species as either threats or prey. The idea that they would protect human prisoners was impossible. General, are you certain about this? Your war beasts have never shown protective behavior toward any species other than their own handlers? I am certain, Krath replied grimly. We have security footage. The beasts arranged themselves in a defensive formation around the humans within hours of the prisoners being brought to the facility. They bring them food and water. They even appear to be communicating with them. The bridge crew had started to gather around Jake as word of the unusual transmission spread. His second in command, Lieutenant Amy Collins, moved closer to listen. Jake could see the same confusion on her face that he felt. What exactly are you asking us to do? Jake asked. General Krath straightened slightly, though Jake could see it took effort. We formally request human intervention. Can communicate with these creatures and restore order to our facility. The silence that followed was deafening. In the 200 years since humans had made first contact with alien civilizations, no species had ever asked for their help with anything like this. Humans were considered useful for their adaptability and their unusual problem-solving abilities, but they were still seen as a relatively young and inexperienced species by most of the galaxy. You're asking us to come to your military facility and handle your war beasts? Jake wanted to make sure he understood correctly. Yes, Krath admitted. We have tried everything. Tranquilizers have no effect. Sonic weapons only make them more aggressive. Even stun weapons, designed to incapacitate creatures, their size bounce off them harmlessly. But they show no hostility toward humans. Jake looked around at his crew. Every face showed the same mixture of disbelief and curiosity. This was unprecedented. The mighty Vorthok Empire, asking humanity for help with their own weapons. General, I'll need to consult with Command and get back to you. Time is critical, Commander. The situation grows worse each hour. The beasts are becoming more protective and aggressive toward my forces. Dr. Lisa Martinez had never expected her quiet career studying animal behavior would lead her to a Vorthok military station. She stepped off the transport shuttle wearing nothing but standard field clothes and carrying a simple research bag. Around her, dozens of heavily armed Vorthok soldiers stood in full battle armor, their weapons ready. The contrast was almost comical. 3 days earlier, she had been working at the Terran Wildlife Research Center, helping rehabilitate injured animals from across Earth's colonies. Then Commander Morrison's urgent message had arrived at her office. The military needed someone who understood animal psychology and wasn't afraid of dangerous creatures. Most experts had refused the assignment outright. Lisa had volunteered within an hour. Her colleagues thought she had lost her mind. Her supervisor had tried to talk her out of it. Even her own mother had called, begging her to reconsider. Everyone knew this was a suicide mission, dressed up with fancy words like diplomatic biological assessment. But Lisa had always been drawn to the animals that others feared. Growing up on a frontier colony, she had worked with everything from wild predators to genetically modified guard beasts. She understood that the most dangerous animals were usually just scared, confused, or protecting something they cared about. General Krath met her at the shuttle dock, his imposing figure towering over her. The Vorthok leader looked even more stressed than he had appeared in the transmission recordings. His scales were darker than usual, and she could see tension in every line of his body. "Dr. Martinez," he said formally, "I must warn you that this situation has deteriorated since we last spoke. The creatures have become even more aggressive toward my personnel. Yesterday, they injured 2 more soldiers who got too close to the containment area." Lisa nodded calmly. "Have they shown any aggression toward the human prisoners?" "None whatsoever," Krath admitted. "If anything, they seem more protective. They share their food rations with the humans and have created what appears to be sleeping areas for them." As they walked through the station's corridors, Lisa noticed how the Vorthok soldiers looked at her. Some seemed curious, others worried. A few appeared to think she was completely insane. She couldn't blame them, from their perspective. A small human female was about to walk into a room full of creatures that had killed their best beast handlers. "How long have you been using these animals as weapons?" Lisa asked as they approached the containment area. General Krath's expression tightened. "The war beasts have served the Vorthok military for over 3 centuries. They are bred specifically for combat and trained from birth to obey commands without question. And before that, in the wild, I mean? What were they like?" The general paused, clearly not expecting the question. "I do not know. The wild populations were eliminated long ago to prevent genetic contamination of our military breeding lines." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. These creatures had been turned into weapons so long ago that no one even remembered what they were supposed to be naturally. They reached the containment area, and Lisa could hear sounds from beyond the sealed doors. Low rumbling calls, the scrape of claws on metal flooring, and something else, soft sounds that almost sounded like purring. "Doors are reinforced titanium," General Krath explained. "We can open them remotely from the observation deck above. But I strongly advise you to observe from there first." Lisa shook her head. "I need to meet them on their level. Animals can sense fear and tension. If I'm hiding behind barriers, they'll know I see them as threats." The general's scales rippled with what she had learned was the Vorthok equivalent of disbelief. "Doctor, these creatures have killed experienced handlers. They are not domestic pets," Lisa agreed quietly, "but they're not mindless killing machines either. Something made them change their behavior. Something made them decide to protect those humans instead of following orders. I need to understand what that was." The massive doors began to slide open with a mechanical hiss that echoed through the corridor. Sounds from inside immediately changed. The low rumbling became more focused, more alert. Lisa could hear movement as the creatures repositioned themselves. "Stay back, human!" General Krath barked. Lisa was already walking forward into the containment area, The sight that greeted her took her breath away. 12 massive creatures, each the size of a small transport vehicle, moved in perfect coordination around a group of frightened human civilians. The beasts' black hides seemed to glow with patterns of blue and green light that pulsed in rhythm. Their eyes, intelligent and watchful, tracked every movement, but what struck Lisa most was their formation. These weren't random positions. Largest creatures were positioned between the humans and the entrance. The smaller ones had created a second ring of protection, and in the center, the human prisoners huddled together, clearly terrified but unharmed. The nearest beast, a massive female with old scars across her snout and face, turned toward Lisa. The creature was beautiful in a deadly way, built like a perfect predator, but moving with careful grace. Lisa expected a roar, a threat display, something aggressive. Instead, the beast made a low, questioning sound. Her head tilted slightly, the bioluminescent patterns on her hide shifted to softer colors. Lisa knelt down slowly, extending her hand palm up in the universal gesture of peace.
Nice.
She spoke in the same gentle tone she had always used with frightened animals back home. "Hey there, beautiful. You're protecting them, aren't you?" Dr. Lisa Martinez had made an unusual decision. Instead of observing the creatures from the safety of the observation deck, she had asked General Krath to set up a small camp inside the containment area itself. For the next 3 days, she lived alongside the beasts and the human prisoners, sleeping on a simple cot just 20 feet away from creatures that had killed trained soldiers. The first night was the longest of her life. She lay awake listening to every sound, every movement in the darkness. But as the hours passed, she began to notice something remarkable. The creatures took turns staying awake, keeping watch. They moved quietly during the night, checking on the sleeping humans like parents checking on their children by the second day. Lisa was taking detailed notes on everything she observed. The beasts had established clear routines. They woke up at the same time each morning, stretching and grooming themselves in a specific order. The largest female always ate first, then the others followed according to what appeared to be a complex social hierarchy. But most interesting was how they treated the human prisoners. The creatures brought them the best portions of food, leaving the scraps for themselves. When one of the children cried from fear, the nearest beast would lie down nearby, making soft rumbling sounds until the child calmed down. On the third day, Lisa requested a video conference with General Krath. She could see the frustration building on his scaled features as she shared her observations. "General, I need you to understand something important," Lisa began, her voice calm but firm. "These aren't war beasts at all. They're pack animals. Highly intelligent, deeply social pack animals." General Krath's jaw tightened with anger. "Impossible. They are bred specifically for killing. They have been weapons of war for 300 years. "No," Lisa replied, shaking her head. "They're bred for loyalty. But you've been mistaking their protective instincts for mindless aggression this whole time." She gestured toward the main area of the containment space, where the largest male was carefully pushing a food container toward a frightened 10-year-old boy. The massive creature, which could have crushed the child without effort, moved with incredible gentleness. "Look at their behavior patterns, General. Really look. They've adopted these humans as pack members. More specifically, they see them as young pack members who need protection and care." General Krath studied the video feed, his expression skeptical. "You are telling me that our most feared weapons think these prisoners are their children?" "Away, yes. These creatures have strong parental instincts that you've been suppressing for centuries. When they encountered beings they perceived as young and helpless, those instincts took over completely." Lisa had spent hours watching the interactions between the beasts and the humans. The creatures were incredibly gentle with the older prisoners, too, but their protective behavior was strongest around the children and the injured adults. They seemed to instinctively recognize vulnerability and respond to it. "This is why your handlers are dying," Lisa continued. "When your soldiers approach, the beasts see them as threats to their adopted young. They're not attacking out of rebellion or malfunction. They're defending their family." Over the following days, Lisa began working with both the creatures and the human civilians to establish better communication. She created simple routines that the beasts could understand and follow. Morning feeding times, exercise periods, rest times. The creatures responded immediately to the structure, seeming almost relieved to have clear expectations. The breakthrough came when Lisa started teaching the beasts basic hand signals. She had expected this to take weeks, but the creatures learned faster than any animal she had ever worked with. Within hours, they were responding to signals for sit, stay, come, and stop. They're not just intelligent, Lisa explained in her daily report to General Krath. They're desperately intelligent. All these years of being treated like mindless weapons, and they've been capable of complex thought and communication. Also worked with the human prisoners, helping them understand that the creatures were protecting them, not holding them captive. The children adapted first, naturally beginning to treat the beasts like enormous guard dogs. The adults took longer, but eventually they too began to relax around their unusual protectors. The most remarkable moment came on the 5th day. One of the children, a 7-year-old girl named Amy, had developed a fever. Lisa watched in amazement as the beasts immediately changed their behavior. They formed a tighter protective circle around the sick child, and the largest female lay down next to her, using her body heat to keep the girl warm. When Lisa tried to approach with medicine, the beasts initially blocked her path, but after she showed them the medication and demonstrated that it would help the child, they stepped aside and watched carefully as she administered treatment. They don't respond to dominance or fear, Lisa reported that evening. They respond to consistency, care, and clear communication about protection. These creatures want to be partners, not weapons. General Kraft's worldview was crumbling, and Lisa could see it in his expression during their video calls. After a week of living with the creatures, Dr. Lisa Martinez felt ready to show General Kraft what she had discovered. She had requested that all the senior Vorthok military officers gather in the observation deck above the containment area. She could see them through the transparent walls, their scaled faces filled with doubt and curiosity. General Kraft, Lisa spoke into her communicator. I'm going to demonstrate what these creatures are truly capable of when they're treated as partners instead of weapons. General Kraft's voice crackled back through the speaker. Doctor, my officers believe this is too dangerous. These beasts killed our best handlers. Lisa looked around the containment area. All 12 creatures were watching her, their intelligent eyes focused and alert. Over the past week, she had learned to read their body language, their light patterns, even the subtle sounds they made to communicate with each other. Trust me, she said simply. Lisa walked to the center of the large space and raised her right hand. Immediately, all 12 beasts moved into a perfect circle around her. Their movements were fluid and coordinated, like a dance they had practiced for years instead of days. She could hear gasps from the observation deck above. These same creatures had been uncontrollable just a week ago, and now they were responding. 2 simple hand gestures from an unarmed human. Formation Alpha, Lisa called out, using a term she had taught them. The beasts immediately shifted positions. The largest ones moved to the outer edge of the circle, while the smaller, faster ones took positions closer to Lisa. It was a defensive formation, but also one that allowed for quick movement in any direction. General Kraft's voice came through. The speaker, filled with disbelief. This is impossible. How are they responding so quickly? Lisa smiled as she watched the creatures hold their positions perfectly, because they want to work with someone general. They've been waiting centuries for someone to treat them like the intelligent beings they are, instead of mindless tools. She gave another hand signal, and the beasts smoothly transitioned into a completely different formation. Now they were arranged in 2 parallel lines, creating a clear path down the middle of the containment area. Michael Carroll, Lisa called. Two of the rescued colonists. Could you bring the water containers from the supply area to the medical station? The 2 humans looked nervous, but began walking down the corridor created by the beasts. As they moved, Lisa watched something remarkable happen. The creatures subtly adjusted their positions to maintain perfect protection around the walking humans. When Michael stumbled slightly, the nearest beast shifted just enough to block him from view of the observation deck, giving him privacy to regain his balance. But the real test came when two Vorthok guards, following their old protocols, approached the containment area too quickly. The moment their heavy footsteps echoed through the space, low warning sounds rumbled from several of the beasts. The humans in the observation deck tensed, expecting an attack. But Lisa recognized the sounds immediately. They weren't roars of rage or threats of violence. They were controlled warnings, as specific and purposeful as a guard dog's bark when strangers approach a house. "Stop," Lisa called to the approaching guards. "Move slowly and keep your weapons down." The guards hesitated, looking up at General Krath for confirmation. When he nodded, they slowed their approach. Immediately, the warning sounds from the beasts became softer, less urgent. "You see," Lisa explained, still standing calmly in the center of the formation. "They're not attacking randomly. They're communicating. Those sounds mean slow down. You're moving too fast near our protected ones." It's exactly the same way a mother animal warns threats away from her young. She walked over to the largest female, the scarred creature who had first greeted her a week ago. Lisa placed her hand gently on the beast's massive flank, and the creature's bioluminescent patterns shifted to warm, peaceful colors. "For 300 years you've been trying to break their protective instincts," Lisa said, looking directly up at General Krath through the transparent wall. "You've been punishing them for caring, for wanting to protect and serve, but you can't break instincts that deep. You can only redirect them." She gave a final hand signal, and all 12 beasts moved smoothly back into a resting formation. They settled down in their preferred spots around the containment area, but their eyes remained alert and focused on Lisa. The silence from the observation deck stretched for long minutes. Finally, General Kraft's voice came through the speaker, quiet and thoughtful. "Dr. Martinez, in 1 week you have achieved control that our handlers could not maintain in years of training." Lisa shook her head. "Not control, General. Partnership. They're not responding to fear or dominance. They're responding to trust and purpose. All this time, you've been trying to break something that was never meant to be broken." 6 months had passed since Dr. Lisa Martinez first walked into that Vorthok containment area, and the galaxy had never been the same. Commander Jake Morrison stood in the main corridor of the newly built Humans and Fauna Relations Center on Luna Station, watching the bustling activity around him with amazement. The facility was enormous, stretching across 3 levels of the space station. Through the transparent walls, you could see dozens of specialized habitats designed for creatures from across the known galaxy. The center housed over 300 human specialists, all working with animals that other species had labeled as dangerous, untrainable, or problematic. Jake paused at one of the observation windows and smiled. Inside, he watched Dr. Martinez working with a group of human children and 3 of the former Vorthok warbeasts. The massive creatures, now officially called Guardian Partners, were playing what appeared to be an elaborate game of hide-and-seek. The children giggled as they darted between the legs of creatures that could have crushed battle mechs. While the beasts carefully stepped around them with incredible precision, it was hard to believe these were the same animals that had terrified an entire empire just months ago. Commander Morrison called Lieutenant Ben Harper, Jake's new aide at the facility. "The morning reports are ready for your review." Jake turned away from the heartwarming scene and followed Ben to the main administration office. The reports made for fascinating reading, request after request from alien governments, all asking for human help with their own impossible animal problems. "The Centauri Republic submitted another formal request yesterday," Ben reported, scrolling through the data on his tablet. "They want help with their flying hunters. Apparently, these creatures have been refusing to work with their handlers for the past 50 years. The Centauri military is completely baffled." Jake nodded, making notes. The Centauri flying hunters were legendary throughout their sector of space. They were used for reconnaissance and light combat, but according to the reports, they had become increasingly difficult to control over the decades. "What else came in?" Jake asked. "The aquatic hegemony wants to discuss their sea dwellers," Ben continued. "These creatures used to be their primary method of underwater exploration and construction. But now they're calling them rebellious and unmanageable. The hegemony is considering terminating the entire program." Jake shook his head. After what they had learned from the Vorthok situation, he suspected these weren't rebellion problems at all. They were probably communication and treatment issues that had been building up for generations. The Stellar Federation also sent a priority message, Ben added. They have mining creatures that have stopped working. The creatures just sit in the tunnels and refuse to move, no matter what incentives or punishments the handlers try. The pattern was becoming clear to Jake. Across the galaxy, intelligent creatures that had been used as tools and weapons for centuries were starting to resist their treatment. But instead of seeing this as a sign that these animals needed better care and understanding, most species were simply trying to find new ways to force compliance. Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway, still wearing her work clothes from the habitat where she had been playing with the children and guardian partners. Her reputation had grown incredibly over the past months. Universities from 50 different worlds were studying her methods. Her techniques were being translated into dozens of alien languages. "How did the session go with the kids today?" Jake asked. Lisa's face lit up with a warm smile. "Wonderful. The guardian partners are so gentle with them. One of the children, little Tommy, was afraid of large animals before he came here. Now he's teaching his favorite guardian how to play fetch." She moved to the observation window that looked out over the main habitat areas. "You know what's interesting? Every single species that contacts us describes their animal problems the same way. The creatures are malfunctioning or broken or rebellious. But when we actually meet these animals, we find out they're just trying to communicate needs that have been ignored for generations." Jake joined her at the window. Below them, he could see human specialists working with creatures from a dozen different worlds. There were the crystalline shell creatures from the Outer Rim, who had been labeled as aggressive by their handlers but turned out to simply need more social interaction with their own kind. There were the floating gas bag creatures from the nebula colonies, who had been refusing orders because their handlers didn't understand their complex mating season cycles. "It's remarkable," Jake observed. "Every species in the galaxy has developed advanced technology, space travel, complex governments, but somehow they all miss the basics of animal psychology and care." Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "I think it's because they approach these creatures as resources to be exploited instead of partners to be understood. Once you start seeing an animal as just a tool, it becomes very difficult to recognize their intelligence and emotional needs." An urgent chime sounded from Ben's tablet. He looked at the screen and his eyebrows rose in surprise. "Commander, we just received a message from the Galactic Council itself. They want to establish a formal partnership with our center. They're asking us to create training programs for animal handlers across all member species." Jake felt a surge of pride mixed with disbelief. 6 months ago, humans had been considered a minor species, useful mainly for their adaptability but not particularly influential in galactic affairs. Now, the most powerful governing body in known space was asking for their expertise. "There's more," Ben continued, reading from his tablet. "They want to establish similar human-xenofauna relations centers in each sector of the galaxy. They're calling it the Universal Animal Welfare Initiative." Lisa laughed, a sound filled with joy and amazement. 6 months ago, I was just trying to help some scared animals and frightened people. Now, we're changing how the entire galaxy treats non-human intelligence." She gestured toward the habitats below, where dozens of success stories were playing out every day. Turns out, the galaxy was full of creatures that just needed someone to understand what they were trying to protect, what they needed to be happy, and how they wanted to contribute. The revolution hadn't come through conquest or superior technology. It had come through something much simpler and more powerful: the recognition that the fiercest protectors, when treated with respect and understanding, often became the most loyal friends and partners anyone could ask for.